I'll introduce you يعني on the personal level كده أكتر, but in general, and then I'll leave to you the professional stuff for you to talk about. For both of us to talk about, yes. So I think most of you, if not all of you, know at the A we have a shortage of child therapists in the country. And when I have anyone asking me about a referral for someone who can work with kids who I recommend and I trust and I know their approach is good, I don't have anyone in mind except this lady. I'm very grateful that she's with us today, and I'm very happy that she'll be talking to us about this more. And hopefully this will inspire some to يعني follow in her footsteps somehow, because we do need more people يعني who are that capable and qualified. Welcome to the lab. We're very happy to have you with us النهارده. Would you like to start كده by talking about what did you study, what do you do, just briefly كده introducing yourself.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I loved it so much. It's my first time here. طبعا yes, there is a shortage. I really hope all of you guys, not all, maybe some, follow in the child psychology path. Is anyone interested? Oh, amazing! Wow, every semester is bigger. Okay, amazing. So I'm a child and adolescent psychologist. I did my undergrad here in AUC, and then I worked in Sabah Khamsin, Children's Cancer Hospital, for a year. That's when I really knew I wanted to work with children. Not because of what I learned, but what I learned on an emotional level, where I really felt the passion I had for working with children, and I would do my own research. Didn't get much supervision, which is the case generally, especially in hospitals. So then I did my master's in UCL in London. It was run in conjunction with the Anna Freud Center, and so was focused on psychoanalysis. And during that, it was very intensive. We had to do a parent observation, infant observation. And what we had to do was find our own parent that basically just gave birth. And then we'd go to her house once a week and observe her and her child. My stance was like, as if I'm not there, I'm not allowed to speak, I'm not allowed to ask for water, I'm not asked to engage in any conversation. Taban, the parent does try to, but then this was a huge learning experience for me, because I had to just observe and not take notes, and then after it I would have to write up observation notes, and then we discuss it in seminars. So I think that really set the foundation for me. The parent-child interaction, the first year of life, how the parent responds to the child, how I felt when the parent would do something in specific. Is she attentive, is she not? And then you find yourself going into this like judgmental stance, but then that's what you really work through. So yeah, that's at the basis. And then since I've been working in Egypt in different clinics, now I'm in therapy and I work privately. So yeah.
It's يعني a wonderful كده background for us to know, and it's very interesting that you did this observational study. I know we talked about it before.
Yeah.
The fact that it was a home study كمان makes it very interesting. A lot of the research that's done with parents and kids is done at home. It's very difficult in our culture, honestly, but it's such an interesting thing to do يعني. حلو قوي. فده يدخلنا اكتر بقى في play, and so primarily what you do in therapy is play therapy. صح كده؟ Can you tell us الأول if there is a right way to play with kids if we want to have a healthy, secure attachment with a child? Is there a right way to play with a child?
So I wouldn't call it a right way, but I'd say a purposeful way, where I think as adults we learn to not play.
Yeah.
Because it's like or it's just so childish, or you need to be serious, you need to be in your serious adulting things. And so because of that, we are not learning to be as creative, and with children it's almost like it's just an innate feeling to play and to just go with that creativity. So it's in play that you're able to be creative, and then when you are creative you feel alive, and that's the main basis of play therapy. So there's no right way, but there is a way in order to focus on certain things like providing safety, being attentive, not having your phone with you. That's, of course, if you're a parent and child, we think we're playing, but we're not actually being attentive. We're not actually entering the child's inner world. We're asking the child to come up to us ونلعب حاجة كده like, you know, shallow way of play. But to actually play is to delight in the child, is to really embody the experience and play, being attentive to what the child wants to explore.
I'll probe more on that because I think this is very interesting and this is an area that we don't always understand very clearly. فالأول هنتكلم على parent-child and then I'll ask you a question about how do you use that in therapy بعدين. So now let's focus on the parent-child relationship. If a mom has several kids and they are in different age groups, I understand طبعا the importance of doing quality time one-on-one, but if that's not always possible, like if the mom is with the kids alone and there's no support أو حاجة, how can she be attentive and present with more than one child at a time? How do you do that? Is that possible?
So with this, I would recommend where it's almost like every child understands that there's mommy and me time with each child and to respect that. But it can also be play with everyone, where we're all playing together and attending to each one individually. Whether it's just حتى whatever it is, like playing with the teenager or a specific game that this kid wants to play, so we're all going to play this. And then next time someone else decides what we're playing on a Friday. Okay. And so each child feels attended to.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the mom بقى. And I think this is such an important thing برضو to talk about because of the intergenerational attachment issues وكده. When you say a mom can't play, I can't help but think of a mom who had a childhood where no one played with her. فأصلا that experience of being attended to and someone being present with me and knowing how to play and just have fun and be in the moment, it might be very foreign for some people. What do you do with that as a therapist? How do you help in that case?
So this is where parent involvement is really important. And honestly, I noticed this in this culture especially, where a lot of the work, in the way I learned it, is with child only. But you cannot work with a child without the parent because the child goes back to the parent. And most likely we're all bringing in our own trauma, our own experience of being a child and being a parent. So when you become a parent, you're re-triggered whether you like it or not. And you bring that to your conscious awareness to make changes. This is when I shift treatment to working with moms individually, where we kind of just do some inner child work where did you play as a child? What did you have? What did you not have? What did you miss? And what is re-triggered when you are dealing with your child? And then that's where the work is really bringing awareness to the mom and then bringing her in the room so that they can work on their attachment in a more secure way and a safer way within the premise of the therapy room. That's really the essence of therapy in general. And then we can apply that outside of the room. So she feels more confident, the child feels like, okay, I can access this, I can just be. And then that's when it's like taken outside of the room.
That's amazing. And I think this means you're not only working on the child's attachment, but you're also helping the mom be aware and work on her own attachment as well.
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about adults not knowing how to play sometimes, play has مش عارفة how to explain that, but I think when we're serious, when we know what we're doing, when we have a checklist, we're very much in control. When you let yourself be and just play and sit with the child on the floor, it takes some vulnerability. I don't know if that's the right word here, but في حتة كده إنه you're not in control, you're more in the moment. And I think for some people that might feel scary as an adult. Being aware of that is very interesting. Actually, that's very powerful word.
Yeah.
I like that. ممكن ناخد كده أسئلة الأول هنا قبل ما move on لحتة تانية, حتة child, parent and
Do you guys play?
Do you guys play? اللي جايين كلاس النهارده بتاع child psychology we're playing النهارده.
يعني أنا عندي 500 سؤال.
ممكن نبتدي بواحد.
طب خلي حد تاني يسأل لحد ما اختار عشان.
عندي سؤال. ازاي الفرق لو بلاي ما بين الأم وولد أو أم وبنت؟
It depends on the mom. What is she bringing to the room? Does she have issues with playing with her son? And then sometimes that does come up. Where why are you like this with your son and not like this with your daughter? Then sometimes it's like, oh my dad was so tough on me. And then that's when it comes up, and then bringing that to the awareness and working through it. But it really depends on each case.
what do you do بقى with the denying mothers؟ يعني كنت برضه بتقولي هو قعدتي مع الأم to see her triggers بقى. I can imagine a lot of mothers being إنه لا أنا كويسة أنا جايبة الطفل اقعدي مع الطفل أنا مش عايزة أصلا sessions أو كده. We're sure 100% إنه أصلا you are triggered. How do you deal بقى with something like that?
This happens a lot because especially here, parents bring their children, fix him.
بالظبط هو
إيه ده بقاله شهر بيجي he's still the same.
صح.
This is a huge problem here, but, and I've learned this in supervision, it is not my job. It's really not my job. It's my job to bring you in, to try to work with you. But if you're resistant and you're not going to do the work, there's only so much I could do. But I will continue to work with the child.
Okay. As kids بقى.
Yes, and then maybe later on trying to, it's called a parent buy-in. Like as in really trying to get the parents' edge of like how are they going to be convinced of this. And طبعا some parents from first session, some parents never, some parents a few sessions. It really depends, but it is a big struggle here, huge.
Yes.
I have two questions. The first one related to if the play is different when you play with a boy or a girl. Does it differ the kind of play when you play with a boy when you have a boy or a girl, or the same kind of play applies for both?
Yeah, so this is a similar question that we just addressed where.
About the relationship.
Yeah.
With the kind of mom.
Yeah. So it really depends because some boys, masalan, are directed in the form of play that's more aggressive or more like it's more accepted to play in a certain way. And so sometimes you learn these things, they're social constructs. In the room, I try to just come in with, you do as you please. You want to play with a doll, please go ahead, and we are going to enter your world and see what this doll means to you because you can in this room. If it really doesn't...
And do I have to emphasize on the physical play for the boy more?
No,
Because
not
some
at all.
research suggests that for boys you need to let him release the energy and be more physically involved with the nature. Is that true or?
So it really depends on the child because some boys are not like that. So if the child is presenting that, actually ADHD, a lot of it working through attachment is connection. They're looking for attachment. They're looking to be attended to. And this is what I'm going to focus on in the room. Because if this child is trying to get attention in the room, at school, and constantly being told that you're bad, you're disrupting the class, you're so on and so forth, then I'm going to really focus on correcting that experience and using different language to make him feel more positive, more accepted, more able to just be.
Thank you.
I want to build on that question and ask you, Lau, you think there is between directive and non-directive play. Do you think one is always better than the other? Are there instances when one would be preferable over the other? Well, it depends on the context.
I think it depends on the context, but generally I always start with non-directive play so that I can see where the child goes. I want to go with the child, I want this child to trust me, and so I want this child to be in control of the session. And so I go with that, and then later on it can be more directive if masalan we want to work on team building or on social skills or peer work, so we're going to do specific things with emotion cards or whatever, and I'll bring it in the room.
Okay. Any other questions about this?
سؤال ممكن ما يكونش ليه دعوة بالطفل أوي بس دي أكتر طريقة بتحسيها أنتي إنه الأهالي يديسبلين عيالهم.
Okay, big question. I think the basis is providing safety and connection. Connection. I think this is what I focus on with my parent sessions. Connect with your child. It doesn't matter what grade he got. Is it going to matter in 10 years' time? No, it's not. So what is he learning from this experience? How are you responding to him? Does he feel accepted? And this is what we really keep going back to. Just to kind of shortcut.
I have a question. في نوشن كده ان المادرز مش بيعرفوا يلعبوا مع الولاد، هي لو حابه حتى تلعب كله بس ستيل ساعات يبقى الامهات بورينج شويه عن الفاضل، لان engaging في اللعب يبقى من اكتر من ناحيه الفاضل فيا يعني. فهل ده حقيقي فعلا؟
Interesting question. Why do you guys think moms are perceived as boring? Really?
Because they're more direct with muscles.
Yeah. What else?
بعدين احنا بنحب اللعب برضه فهتبقى
And mothers don't? We're gonna argue.
I think they're also more cautious.
Moms?
They seem a bit more boring.
Okay. Why do you think they're more cautious?
They don't engage in like physical activity. They're afraid like he might trip, he might get injured.
Okay. So, yeah.
I feel like maybe it has something to do more with our culture and the boundaries that we put to each role, what a mom does.
Yeah.
I can use play as a way to even discipline my child. اللي هو لا احنا بنعمل كده مش بنعمل كده، انت هتبقى مؤدب، انت هتبقى مش عارفه ايه. Whereas I think dads don't really culturally at least they don't play that role قوي. فلما نلعب لا يلا نكونكت يلا نلعب خلاص رجعت الشغل let's have some fun.
Exactly. I think it's such a stereotype where but parents or moms are put into that role, whether they like it or not. Sometimes they're the primary caregivers, so they have to take care of homework and tamarin and so much on their plate. So they're stressed. And that's why generally it looks like, oh, dad comes back after work and now I'm going to have fun. So bad cop, good cop. And in your husband and Nina, that goes into that. But it's not necessarily true. Because if we're co-parenting, then we can both play the role in different ways.
حد عايز يسأل حاجة تانية على الحتة دي before I go into therapy أكتر شوية؟
كنت عايزة أعرف do you work with fathers ever؟ يعني هل بتجيبي fathers كمان؟
Yes. Is it a struggle? Yes. Do I get bullied? Yes. I do. It's just because كمان they're not more able to, or not more able, but I mean they're not given the space to be vulnerable, and so they go into this macho like I need to be the father and I don't feel and so on. So I actually love working with fathers because by the end of it, they're allowed to just be vulnerable and play with their child in a vulnerable way, talk about emotions. Really, I place emphasis on that and it goes a long way.
بس بحس ساعات يعني مش عارفة ده stereotype ولا is it actually true، بس بحس دايما لو حد أصلا جاي therapy، يعني لو شايل كل stereotypes وجاي therapy بتبقى في الأغلب الأم، والأب أصلا اللي هو أنت بتوديه لدكتور نفسي هو كويس قوي وكده، I can't even imagine إنه موافق يجي أصلا يسمعك.
Yeah.
at some points بيبقى أصلا مشكلة بتبقى كبيرة قوي في الأب، يعني الأم she's doing her best بس الأب is not cooperative، فبرضه زي ما قلتي there's so much you can do.
Yeah.
فلو الأب ما جاش do you just يعني do you just work with what you have?
Definitely, yeah, because I have to work with what I have. Legally, no one's obliged to do anything. But I am consistent in asking, can I please see you, can I please see you? And generally, I like to meet fathers alone because sometimes they struggle to be vulnerable in front of their partner, unfortunately. But I like to meet them alone, and so I can get their buy-in. Really going into what does the father like, and let me try to get to you and connect with you. But, yeah.
So I know it's hard to deal with children, especially at a young age. They can't express, they can't put into words how they feel. But I wanted to ask, how do you deal with children who are extremely non-vocal? It's hard to, even with play, يتكلموا.
And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about play therapy. You don't need to talk at all. And with more مثلا avoidant children, I won't be so in your face. I'm gonna probably sit next to you, play with you شوية, so you warm up with me. You know, go with your flow until you're comfortable. You see me as a safe figure, and then you're able to open up شوية. We're working through it, but I'm going with your own pace. Some kids are non-verbal, some kids extremely anxious, don't want to speak. Some kids want their parent to be in the session, and that's completely fine. Really just going with where the child is.
Can I follow up on that question and then we take the next question? لما بتقولي دلوقتي a child who's avoidant, you have certain ways of dealing with that. If a child, from your observation, you can see the child has anxious attachment. It means that probably they need a lot of reassurance, they need a lot of proximity, they need they need more of you in that sense. How do you do that while still maintaining certain boundaries and also making sure the child does not become overly dependent on you as a therapist, while in the end your goal is for the child to have that kind of relationship with the mom? But
Yeah.
how do you do that balance?
So كده the child will reenact their attachment with me.
Yeah.
And that's actually very helpful. That's where the transference is, and we work through that. But I think the first session is crucial, because the first session we set the contract. Like, this is what we're allowed to do, this is who I am, I'm not going to hug you or touch you. We are going to play through hard feelings sometimes, or whatever, how old the child is. It's more like age appropriate. And then through that, the child then knows I can do whatever I want here. I actually had a child, I told him, you can do whatever you want, and I forgot to say as long as you're safe. And so 20 minutes later, he goes like, can I open the window? And I was like, he's like, I want to jump out the window, he's 5. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I think I forgot to tell you. I was like, as long as we're safe. So children will really try to like...
That's the boundary.
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely. And this is where I think my own attachment, my own work is very important, because with children, they're so vulnerable and it's easy to be triggered. So if you're not aware of your own patterns, if you're not aware of, okay, I'm being triggered because I am Miryam and I have this, then it's really easy to just, it's not going to be a pleasant experience for the child in therapy. But back to your question, so it really depends on the child, of course, but wait, you were asking, معلش.
A child who has anxious attachment tendencies after the proximity or reassurance وحاجات كده.
Yeah, so we focus مثلا on eventually when the child feels safe with me, I'll focus on separating شوية, and then always being consistent, because then he knows I'm going to be off in 2 weeks. The next week I'm going to be off next week. And as well, I have a timer in the session where we have 5 minutes left, because the leaving time in the session is like you're abandoning me. But am I going to do it or are you going to do it? So he feels in control. I know it's going to end when the sand is out. It's our time now. And then he goes and comes back, and then through that consistency, he's able to develop a more secure attachment. And he knows, I'm coming back. I'm not going to leave him.
Do you ever explore the play between siblings, or the dynamic between them to the time you anything about them?
Yeah. Sometimes I have sibling sessions, because it tells me a lot about their pattern. And then sometimes it's more directive, where we're working on their relationship, sharing, jealousy, and so on. And sometimes it's non-directive, where I'm just seeing how they're playing and then correcting that, where what are you feeling? Can you tell your sibling this? Also depends on the child. So yeah, it is very helpful to get siblings involved.
I have a question. How do you challenge or work against the stereotype in play is always portrayed as a reward, مش as something that is essential and that has to be لازم يحصل. Also, you're saying in في حاجات gives you a lot of cues and it tells you like about the overall picture. I want to know how مثلا structured and unstructured play give you cues يعني in what ways? Can you give examples مثلا?
Okay, what do you mean by does it give me cues?
You mentioned there's a lot of things in the way the child plays gives you cues of, for example, underlying like
what they want to
do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to know an example يعني عايز أعرف if it's a structured play, how do you go with it? If it's unstructured, اللي هو he is leading and he is in control, what it tells يعني.
Okay.
Each one tells.
Okay. So like with a non-directive approach, there's no specific thing that I want you to work on. So essentially the child feels like I'm in charge here. I can play whatever I want to play. And through those patterns and what he says, I'm able then to form an analysis and to engage in that with him, whatever he's reenacting. And then over time, it tells me a lot and we start correcting that experience. But a more structured way, for example, I had a child who father suddenly left, and the mom didn't have a big budget to consistently come for every week. So I used a more directive approach where for emotion cards, dad is away, but then like, you know, I'm like, oh, what's happening in this picture? And then he starts talking. So it's a more, you know, easier way to come in where the child is able to use the emotion card. It's not very directive, but it is because I put it there and I want to talk about your dad. So yeah.
ولما كنت بتقولي this is Miryam who's playing دلوقتي so there are your own triggers. How do you work with this? يعني برضو you also mentioned في الأول you work with cancer patients. I can imagine how this is very يعني intense.
Yeah.
how do you work on Miryam بقى who's triggered في حاجات بتسمعها في حاجة قصة you know that this child has been going through أو كده حتى دي مش حاجة you relate in any way بس this is a child telling you he's been through a lot. How do you work with this and how you I know طبعا with supervision and everything
yeah.
بس يعني you بقى as
Okay. As Miryam. Just to put things into perspective, I'm a sensitive person. But actually I used to take that as, oh my god, I'm not going to be able to, but it worked wonders when working with children because I can use that empathy in the room where I can really feel for you, but that's heavy on me. So yes, I go to therapy. I've done my psychoanalytic work intensively for a year. I'm aware of my triggers, and definitely it's never going to be enough, but I'm a work in progress where I'm aware. Right now, I don't want to react based on, this is really annoying me, but masalan, if I'm not comfortable with sand, I'm not going to bring it into the room, because I'm going to be triggered. If the kid starts throwing sand everywhere, I'm going to feel triggered, and then I'm going to project that onto this child. So I will not bring sand in the room, because Miryam cannot work with sand. Child doesn't need to work with sand then, because then I won't be able to help the child freely, unconditionally, because I will be very triggered by the sand. But it's just making small changes, but supervision is really important.
follow up على ده in case anyone has a similar question. لو دلوقتي حد who wants to work with kids and الحد ده is a sensitive person زي ما انت بتقولي and this is a good thing. Where do you draw the line ما بين I'm too sensitive, I can't do this is not for me, I can't be working with kids, I love kids but I can't work with kids, وإمتى لا, this is actually a good thing, it will make me a good therapist. Do you have any advice here or anything regarding that distinction?
Yeah, so like I said, that year working in the cancer hospital told me a lot. There were days where I'd stay after hours with patients because they're dying or they're really going through a lot, and I noticed I was giving too much and I was burnt out. That wasn't okay by all means. But I also noticed how much I love it. I'm so passionate about it, but I know my threshold. So I know I cannot work with Masan for more than 4 kids in a day. That's me right now, by the way. Where I'll work the rest of the sessions with teens. Because it's just a lot. It's draining. It takes a lot out of me. And so I know that I can't, but I really love this work, so I'll do it in the way that I can, so I can be present and actually attentive, not just do more sessions to make more money and
and you can decide, there are some cases that you can't work with, and this is too triggering for me. Yeah. When we do with adults, like there are some cases that you just don't work with.
Exactly. Like if you don't work well with grief, then don't take on grief clients, and that's where the intake is, the intake form.
Do you find it more draining to work with children rather than working with adolescents?
Yes. Depends on the case. Because with children, sometimes they don't have the language to say what they're feeling. So I need to be aware of everything that they're doing. I need to be attentive. And you're playing and you're like trying to, and it's like at the end, sometimes the room is a mess and I don't let them clean up. So it's draining. Like it takes a lot out of me and I need space ma bainhom. Some teens though are draining, but it really depends on the case. With some children, social skills is not as intense as working through trauma. But generally working with kids, it takes a lot out of you, and I think you really need to be so passionate about it. It's interesting.
Something you mentioned that's really interesting is how, especially at the beginning of using play with a child, you're very non-directed to kind of see where they go with things. For children who do not have the language to express to you, أنا عملت كذا عشان كذا, or this is my dad, this is مش عارفة إيه, I'm trying to show you this. one thing that comes to mind is أكيد your own perception of what that is comes from your own history. Like أنت حطيته كده عشان ده is because of this. How do you navigate perception of play? Like, you know, this is the narrative that they're trying to communicate without actually there being a narrative. Like, how do you separate?
I think this is the most thing I struggled with in the beginning. So what we have to do is restate what they're doing or saying. Factual, not emotional.
Okay.
So you don't want me inside of your room, you want me in the top of the whatever. Or you don't want your dad here, you want him over here. And then sometimes we, no, that's not what I mean. And then you get to like read it again. I'm not going to make any judgment. I'm going to take you as you are and repeat what you're doing and saying to just clarify. And then we start going from there.
So you don't actually make any interpretations, it's all factual, and then you wait for
In the
their
beginning.
response to the
Exactly.
So what if they don't talk about it? يعني what if أصلا مثلا I know this is an extreme case بس مثلا rape أو حاجة مش هتقولي له إيه ده هو يعني في حاجات you won't be able أصلا to say it or don't want to say it because it's triggering or they didn't say it because they don't want to talk about it بس it's clear. How do you avoid being يعني your interpretations?
Yeah, that will probably come over time. When the child feels safe enough with you, then maybe a few more words will come in.
Okay.
Playing in a more directive way. It's just gonna come with time. Because who am I for this child to trust me in the beginning? So I need to build that trust over time, and that's what requires a lot of patience.
What if the child is used to being the good boy or the good girl at home, and that's how they get accepted, that's how they feel that they're loved والحاجات دي كلها, and then they come into the therapy room and you feel that the same dynamic is being reenacted. But they're trying to be good, they're trying to please you, they're trying to say the right things, they're trying to just be good kids. How do you work with that? How, في نفس الوقت انت مش عايزة يعني you don't want to take it to another extreme, but you want to allow the child safety and that kind of space. How do you do that?
So again, with just repeating what they're saying, but in a way that, myself giving like examples of like, I don't know if the child is actually feeling this, but over time, they're not going to be able to mask it. Khalas. It's going to come out one way or another, because you can only do so much. And then when they feel safe to put that guard down, because essentially it's a defense. So when they put it down, then they're able to just be as they are, and then you'll find they're looking for reassurance. They're looking, am I going to get in trouble? You know what I mean?
Is this okay?
Yeah, is this okay? Do you still love me? Do you, you know, and it's like, I'm very neutral. You can do whatever you want to do, as long as you're safe. That's
افتكرت دلوقتي ان احنا one of the previous Mondays we had a presentation about grief and attachment, and I'm thinking now if someone if a child lost an attachment figure, so one of the parents, let's say it's the mom مثلا, how do you work with that in therapy, and how do you what message do you communicate to the child, and how do you work through the grief with an attachment figure particularly?
So that just took me back to just a few cases really that just came to mind where, again, it's just working with what emotions are we feeling, how can we express it through playing so that it's safe to express it. Sometimes children will, sometimes no, they'll just play it out. Sometimes مثلا use figures, they won't use the mom. And it's like, oh, who's that? And where's the mom? Where's the dad? And so on, and they will avoid it. And it's like, it's really hard that mom is not here. And eventually we start to talk about it in a non-directed way first, and then it eventually becomes more directed. But what we are trying to do is correct that experience of, because what creates trauma? It's how we perceive it, how we perceive each situation. So how we make sense of what happened, this is what I want to correct, and rewrite that story within the therapy room. And that's where we start to.
And in that example that you just gave, eventually the goal is to bring mom back, the figure, into the play.
Yeah.
Or
Or talking to mom, or writing a story, or saying a story about mom, or whether it's through narrative work, or through playing with the dolls, or more directive. If the child is a bit older, we can write something, a letter, a little note. So it's really about just working through it in ways that the child is able to.
Yeah. Very interesting. Questions? بحب نعمل بالانس ممكن أتكلم بس. Yes.
What other kind of corrective techniques do you use? For example, fixing the narrative is one. What else can you use to play to kind of intervene?
So with play therapy, there are so many things you can use. Sometimes I use a toilet roll. Like, it can be anything, literally anything. And before I had my own space, I used to go around with this backpack full of stuff, and I still do in the clinic that I work in. And it can just literally be dolls, art materials, toilet paper rolls, whatever it is, animals, aggressive animals, not so aggressive animals. And through that, we start to see what the child is drawn to, and then we work with that. So storytelling doesn't always work with children. More specific directive approach of playing Uno works with children, because then I'm playing something but I can talk. This is for more verbal children. So it really depends on the child. Are you in the child therapy class?
No, but I
And this برضه relates to something that we talked about last week. مين اللي كان بيتكلم في presentation على when someone who has avoidant tendencies is distracted, then they get their defenses down زينا صح? And then they get to talk and be more vulnerable وكده. We were just talking about this maybe with some adolescents or kids who have that issue that it will help them talk more.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very interesting.
Have you experienced any difficulties with children who have ADD or ADHD that can't focus on multiple things, like they're playing and they're talking, they're not really like interactive, it's the opposite, and they're disturbed?
Yes, definitely. Which is why then I would use non-directive, where whatever they want to play, because then they're drawn to that and they're fully attentive in that, and so I have to go into that and understand what's going on in their inner world at this moment. Yeah, definitely non-directive.
Speaking of ADHD, one of the things we talk about in my classes is the different perspective of ADHD, like the trauma perspective and the fact that it's not just how it's perceived, the stereotypical ways of perceiving a child with ADHD. What's your take on that, and how do you work with kids with ADHD in general? Like you mentioned the connection aspect.
So I was just gonna say connection. For me, it's essential to work with teachers, because this is where the child spends most of their days, most of their hours. And so how a teacher responds to a child is extremely important. And this is why I think working with children in that field is not for everyone, and that's okay. Because you can really, really steer a child into whatever direction of labeling him like, that's odd, you're so lazy, being sent to the principal's office, whatever it is. And I think every behavior is saying something. So working with teachers to focus on the connection of really telling a child, like I was just telling a teacher this, at the end of each day, tell that child what you noticed that they did well. If مثلا they were feeling dysregulated, and usually they like go in front of the line, and this time they sat back and they just went to the line as normal. It's a small thing, but it means a lot.
So acknowledge it.
So acknowledging, I really appreciated how you stood in line, and you know that's hard for you sometimes, but I really appreciated that. And so that goes a long way, giving that child that attention that they're lacking, that they need.
Very interesting. Questions? Yes. Yes, go ahead.
But you can't control the child's environment, if you can't control the child's environment, or parents and teachers are not very cooperative, is there a way that you can kind of create your own safe space for the child and be kind of in this environment, but is that too reliant on كده بتخلي الchild يرجع
So it's harder, but unfortunately sometimes you just have to work with it, especially here, because especially things like domestic violence or whatever it is, you can't really report much stuff, right? So you really need to work with what you have. But to work on the attachment, you need to be a better attachment. And so through that, they're able to develop a more secure way of coping in general. So then it goes to their peers and they improve their relationships, and they're able to have more stable relationships. And at times, of course, it's really difficult because that child only comes an hour a week. they go back to their environment because you do what you gotta do. Yes.
I think the concept of termination in therapy with any client, regardless of age, is difficult if they have issues with abandonment in general. But I feel like especially with kids who might not understand the context of therapy قوي أو إنه كده كده this is something that's gonna end or that I'm not someone who's going to be consistent in your life. While you're talking about consistency, this is something that comes to mind. Like you're telling this child, I'm here for you every week, وهفضل موجودة مش عارفة إيه. And then suddenly you're never going to see me again. So how do you work through that with a child and kind of reduce or work on the fear of abandonment there?
That's such a good question because termination is a whole thing. Like it takes weeks, and depending on the child, Yani Masan, Dr. Noor told me about today 2 months ago, and so I have to put it in my schedule of 2 weeks ago, or my child, I'm not going to be here next week, I'm not going to be here, but we're going to meet this day instead. So just as consistent as you can, but then when we're approaching the end, it's like, I kind of, depends on the age, but reflect on the process of therapy. How did this child come in? Remember when you first came in, you're a bit avoiding me, and then whatever, and then we start reflecting on the process, that's one. And then another session. I feel that we've worked on this and that, and then we start to work on it's coming to an end. Actually, we don't say coming to an end, but our time together is going to stop, and then we start reflecting on that. How are you feeling about it for a few sessions? And then that final termination, we plan a whole thing. Whether it's like what the child wants to do, sometimes he wants to have to eat something. It's like a party. it's like a farewell. Like I'm going to stop coming here, but it's a special and I express kind of how I feel because it's hard for me. It's like I also kind of developed an attachment to this child, seeing him every week. It's a whole thing.
Do you see children afterwards if they do start going through hardship again? Are you open to seeing them again, or like later, or مثلا every month or every 2 weeks? Do you kind of like wean them off therapy in a way?
Yeah, so we start seeing each other every 2 weeks and every 3 weeks, and eventually we stop. But I work with the parents a lot because I don't want it to be, because sometimes we get into that role of, oh my god, he got a bad comment in school, yalla, come back to therapy. I don't want it to be a place where you did something wrong but you're coming to therapy. If I work with them as in really their confidence of when a child does this, their behavior is doing this, and really working through that, because sometimes you just don't need to come to therapy, but it's just a child is going to be a child, they're going to mess up, they're going to...
So you're saying that like you have to develop a secret attachment with the child and you work with them, and that's very important for the child. But what if the mother, whoever is responsible for that child, doesn't bring them in consistently, and then that kind of puts your relationship with them in jeopardy, that I don't know if you would be able to have a secret attachment?
That's a very good question. I tell the parent I can't work with this child. And that's the decision I make. I can see that it's been inconsistent, and then actually through that boundary I've done that kaza marra. The mom she starts to bring him in consistently because she doesn't want to lose a slot, or she wants to fix him, and so through that she starts to become more consistent. So I'm also working with the parent. But if they're inconsistent, then what that's going to do is it's just going to reenact that behavior, and the child's not going to change anything. I do not work with this child at all. And sometimes I just say, you know what, let's do parenting sessions every now and then. Let's do that. But the child can't come in if we're not going to consistently come in. Like Masan, I'm taking a break in December, end of December. So now I stopped taking new clients because then I'm not going to be able to consistently see them for 6 weeks. So I'll take after the holiday because I want to consistently see the child for 6 weeks.
You have a question? Regarding the termination process. What you said اللي هو كأنها مثلا دي اللي هو متفقين عليها مع البيرنت، فهيحصل يعني within the coming weeks هيحصل كده. بس لو termination حصلت out of your control، يعني بطلوا يجوا.
Then there's that. There's not much I can do. Eventually, parents end up coming back, but that's a conversation I end up having with them. But it's okay because in the short time anyway, they got to experience something, maybe, hopefully. But there's no, see, that's where, for us, there's a line. That's not my job anymore.
Okay, so you don't at least try to like contact them once, at least, and see what's going on?
No, so we do, as in like I ask admin to, like let's check in, is everything okay? They don't respond, that's not our job anymore. Yes, do I wonder? Of course.
But at least
like,
try once.
no, we
Yeah.
reach out like, you know, you didn't come in this
Yeah.
week or you've been counseling the past 2 weeks. What's going on? Is everything okay? Will you be continuing and so on?
طب عندي سؤال دلوقتي mothers يعني قصدي اصلا coming to therapy needs a lot of awareness from the mothers انه there has to be something that clear for them to come. I was wondering, do you have this يعني كل children اللي بيجوا in a certain criteria كده of typically not well behaved children and very obvious, so because يعني السؤال ممكن يبان irrelevant شوية بس whenever I think of إنه I want to work with children دايما بحس typically بيروحوا مثلا الchildren اللي عندهم مثلا autism أو الchildren اللي هم is very clear إنه they need therapy while a lot of other children very much need therapy but mothers are just not aware. The question is, do you think في الآخر بيجي children بس اللي very very obvious إن هو they're going to extreme grief أو they're going to very very obvious ADHD وكل الناس بتشتكي منهم ولا actually لا بلاقي في awareness of إنه مش حاجة extreme قوي بس لا they still come and
I think before it was just in times of crisis. Now there's a huge shift where people are more open to coming to, like, it's like coaching sessions, regulating my emotions. So children can learn to regulate their emotions because this is something that's crucial for later on in life. So a lot more parents are actually more willing. I just want to make sure he's okay. Sometimes, you know, I don't know if he's okay, can't connect with him. And so it's just a few sessions, kida, and then, yeah, I think it's extremely healthy. I'll put my children.
احنا our time is coming to an end. We're terminating the talk بتاعنا. But I'll ask you one quick question كده to end with. We talk about rupture and repair a lot with parent-child relationships. Do you think this can also happen with you as a therapist? Any rupture can happen with a child, he misunderstands something, حاجة تحصل and then it can be repaired برضه through play?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm human. So unconsciously I could be projecting something and I won't know, but the hope is that the child feels safe enough to bring it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I get children, I'm angry at you, why did you do this? And it's like, yes, they're expressing their anger because they're safe to.
Yeah.
And that's where, yeah, I do work with that, where it's possible.
That's super interesting. And on behalf of everyone here, I really want to thank you.
لا بس wondering do you learn these things in master يعني حد بيقول لك
So you learn these things. Where during my master's صراحة I did play therapy certification during because I wanted to use the time I was in London because there isn't here. So I learned a lot of that then and in my master's definitely. But you also work it through work. Right? You learn it through work. Experience, supervision, things I don't notice, things I talk about in supervision. It's like, oh my god, I didn't notice that the child felt this, and then you go back and through that experience you really learn a lot about yourself and about working with kids. And reading, honestly reading.
That's inspiring.
Much wonderful بجد. On behalf of everyone, I really want to thank you. That was very
for having me.
insightful. Thank you for the work you do. We need more of you